Welcome back. Today, we're on day nine of Hammerween, and we're going to be talking about 1960s, The Two Faces of Dr. Jekyll, directed by the great Terence Fisher himself. So, you'd be forgiven, given that this is 1960, for imagining that, well, it's Terence Fisher, and we're coming off the back of two great Frankensteins, Draculas, Hound of the Baskervilles. Surely it's just going to be another one of those. Well, a little bit different to say the least. We'll get into it in a moment. Apologies in advance once more about the throaty voice. And if you see me absolutely dripping with sweat, I am in the midst of a really bad cold and struggling enormously. So the minute I finish, I will be rolling back into bed, but I will endeavour to finish this series come what may, even if you try and stop me. So, you're of course familiar with the vague story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. But that being a novella, any adaptation has to expand upon it somewhat. This is no different. So, an outside writer is brought in, Jimmy Sangster, the main writer at this point in Hammer, especially for the Gothics, isn't involved at all. But Wolf um, Mankiewicz is writing here, and he's a bit of a name writer at this point in his career, and was about to go on to one of the all-time classic mistakes a writer could make. He wrote Doctor No for Eon Productions and then said, "Do you know, I don't think James Bond's going to work, and I think it's a bit rubbish, really. Can I have my name taken off it, please?" Whoops. Yeah. Anyway, we all make mistakes. So, this version of Dr. Jekyll is played by Paul Massey, the Canadian actor, who does a pitch perfect English accent, although his voices are rather odd. His Mr. Hyde is perfectly fine, but his Dr. Jekyll is a bit like that. He talks a bit strangely. Mm, wasn't quite jiving with it. Um, a bit cartoonish, which this film, believe me, is not. Um, the main plot of this film, of course, revolves around Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, serum, and shenanigans. So Dr. Jekyll wants to isolate what mankind could be from what mankind would be. So at its best or at its worst, he believes you can isolate one from t'other. And if you do so, you can create, perfect existence, which is technically eugenics, but, he's going about it for the right reasons. He's not advocating murder and Nazism and whatnot. So, okay. I'm not sure they thought that part through when writing the script, but hey, regardless. So, he's working on that pretty much alone as a lone scientist, kind of shunned by society, apart from Dr. Littner, his colleague, who's only in the top and tail of the film, really. Essentially, he works um, in private, doesn't like to be disturbed, and has no time for his beautiful young wife, Kitty, played by Dawn Adams, which is a shame because Kitty is, she's hot to trot. She's ready for a good time. She's wanting to go out and live high society style, which is just as well that Christopher Lee's involved then. He's Paul, he's Dr. Jekyll's friend from way back who is a bit of a cad, a bit of a bounder, but he is having an affair with Kitty. So a bit more melodrama coming into our hammers here. A bit more melodrama in the way here. So Dr. Jekyll, when he takes the formula to become Mr. Hyde for the first time, what makes this version very different is that instead of going from normal, respectable gentleman to slightly monstrous to exceedingly monstrous the more you take it, he goes from rather dull looking, big beard, big eyebrows, curly hair, glasses. He goes from that to looking like a film star. Straight hair, clean shaven, big smile. So very different. So in this case, he doesn't become more animalistic, not in the face of it anyway. We'll get into where he is indeed more animal-like. When he makes the change, of course, he's he's Mr. Hyde, excuse me. So one of the first tropes you have to do in a Jekyll and Hyde is he always has to go for that night out. The scientist that's been devoted needs to shed everything away and experience dens of iniquity and have himself a good time. So he does. He goes to what it's pretty heavily implied is some kind of upper class whorehouse. And he sees there that two of the people there having a good time are his own wife and Christopher Lee, his best friend. Now they don't recognize him, so even though ostensibly, because it's the same actor as Paul Massey, even though they should recognize him because he's just, shaved, they don't recognize him at all. So just roll with that part of it. Roll with that. But he obviously is rather angered by the fact that his wife's betrayed him, his best friend's betrayed him, and that he has nothing apart from his work to live for anymore. Which, if he were still just Dr. Jekyll, would almost certainly be enough. But being now possessed by Mr. Hyde's personality starting to take over, of course, as happens in every version, more and more as the story goes on, he can't have this. So Dr. Jekyll may well just say, oh, well, I'll give her half the estate and she can leave with Christopher Lee. That's fine. I'll carry on with my experiments. Hyde won't have that. Hyde wants revenge. Hyde wants to set things up and lay traps and perform some rather cruel actions, to say the least. I'm not going to spoil the end of this one because it's very different from other Jekyll and Hyde adaptations. Very different, with a completely different ending, a unique ending in many ways, not an entirely satisfactory one. There are long scenes in the middle where we see dens of iniquity, as I said. So we see the whorehouses, we see the opium den, like the one behind me there. We see him living the lifestyle of the depraved and the debauched. But there are also some rather wonderful scenes throughout the film where it really subverts your expectation, where you'd imagine that Christopher Lee's character, being a gambler and being an adulterer and whatnot, you'd think, well, he wouldn't really care for Kitty Jekyll. He just wants sex, just to have a good-looking woman by his side and whatnot. And maybe it's even a bit of illicit fun to do it with his friend's wife, especially kind of thing. When they have some quiet moments together, they do seem to have genuine affection for each other, which again subverts things. Normally, you would have him just be the cad who doesn't care, take her, I don't care about. No, no, he genuinely feels for this woman. So there are lots of parts along the way in this film that subvert what you expect from not just a Jekyll and Hyde film, but this type of film in general. From a Hammer film, from ostensibly a gothic, but more of a Victorian melodrama, and vaguely a kind of sci-fi horror as well. But again, it does add quite a bit of melodrama to affairs that turns into something a bit more shocking. Again, with murder, with rape, with sexual assaults, quite shocking in places, which is why I'm not going to touch on them because I don't want to talk about things like that will be too close to home for some. And again, for some people, I think you won't have seen this in Jekyll and Hyde film and should experience it fresh anyway, should you want to. So I'll leave the plot synopsis just about there. In terms of the review aspect, it's a strong film with some very strong parts. Paul Massey is very good as Jekyll and Hyde. He's film star handsome, but has a lot of talent as well. As Dr. Hyde, sorry, Mr. Hyde. As Dr. Jekyll, the only thing that lets him down is that bloody voice. The oh, another bloody try. He just has this ridiculously ponderous, oafish voice, which doesn't, he's quite clearly a younger man with a fake beard on. So yeah, that doesn't quite work. He didn't need to change the voice to be as silly as that. That's the only criticism of his performance. Dawn Adams steals the show as Kitty. She's wonderful. She's got a very difficult role to fulfill because she needs to be a woman who's cheating on her husband, but she also needs to be sympathetic because you need to think that, yeah, you would, because she's got needs and desires and wants. And the film for 1960 very progressively doesn't judge her for that. It doesn't say, no, she's the wife, she should be faithful. The film lets her have her, go out and have a good time. You deserve it. Why should you be stuck at home all the time? This isn't fair on you. And Dawn Adams, who would become a princess later on in life, rather oddly, um, she brings everything. If her performance isn't bang on as well, the film kind of flounders because you need to believe that Dr. Jekyll would uh, be happy to perhaps lose her, but Mr. Hyde wouldn't. So she has to carry off something a bit more difficult in her performance. And then Christopher Lee playing the other man is having a ball as Paul Allen. He is a cad, a card, a scheme artist, but he's full of charm. He's playing some scenes completely drunk, and it's a joy to see Christopher Lee getting to play that kind of part. So for the first time, really, for Hammer, he's not playing a monster, apart from Hound of the Baskervilles, of course, but he's really enjoying doing so. You can tell he wanted to play Dr. Jekyll. Hammer wouldn't let him. Again, they never thought he was a bankable star until much later on, which was the cause of much consternation between Christopher Lee and Hammer. They considered Peter Cushing the star, Christopher Lee the monster. But Christopher Lee would, of course, get to play Dr. Jekyll in a slightly different name for Amicus in I, Monster, 11 Years On, which is well recommended, highly recommended film. But his performance is fantastic here. So the triad of performers at the top of the bill all bring it. They're all fantastic here. And there are a couple of smaller performers here. Nobody massive you know, that needs to be spot on, but everyone is anyway. I mean, Oliver Reed even pops up for a scene. It's terrific from top to bottom in terms of performances. The production design is great. It's got that wonderful Victoriana quality. It's set 1874. Just looks absolutely sensational. James Bernard's score, phenomenal. His theme for Dr. Jekyll is haunting and elegant and beautiful. And that's wonderful because Dr. Jekyll himself, as I mentioned, is intentionally very boring and dull. So why is his theme beautiful and haunting and pretty? Because that's his idea about his work, about his greater purpose to try and bring about something beautiful for the world and something marvelous for the world. So his theme is his dream, essentially, which very clever musical storytelling. I like that a lot. And the script from Wolf is terrific, full of little witticisms throughout, lots of lines that will get you, if not outright laughing, because humor's changed so much in 70 years, then you certainly smirk quite a bit, quite a bit. Um, and everyone delivers the lines perfectly to get the maximum out of them. Only thing that lets it down, there's a bit of padding. And it's the same as I mentioned in a previous edition, where Hammer are clearly saying you have to come out and watch this on the big screen with us because television will never show you anything as explicit as what we've got. So you get can-can dances and you get a belly dance scene with a snake, which possibly explicit for 1960. By today's standards, you'd get it on BBC Schools at 9 o'clock in the morning. Is what it is. But the sequences are very long, and do slow down the pace of the film, unfortunately. So yeah, I wish that those scenes were truncated and that the plot had been expounded upon, or the film just perhaps made a little bit shorter in general. That'd be my preference. But it's no real criticism because, taking in the context of Hammer of the time, being able to say, hey, if you want to stay at home and watch the Spencer Tracy version that's on TV this weekend, you can do that. But our version's got some real erotica and some dirty stuff that you'll never see on TV. If you can put that in context, you'll have a better time with it, I think. We'll draw it to a conclusion there. Thank you very much. If my cold doesn't turn out any worse tomorrow, I'll be back then. If it does, then I'm sorry, I will have to postpone for a couple of days because I'm really struggling. Um, but hey, folks, thanks very much for your attention. I will catch you hopefully tomorrow. If not, then don't worry, we will do 31 days, even if I don't quite get them all done in October. We will do 31 days of Hammerween, but I'm sure it'll be fine. I've got a secret potion. I just need to shoot it up and see what happens.